There is a woman named Margaret Caldwell who moved to Sun City Center, Florida, in 2019. She was 67 years old. She had saved for 31 years. She sold her house in Columbus, Ohio, for $210,000. She bought a 3-bedroom ranch with a screened lanai and a view of a retention pond for $285,000. She thought she was done. She thought she had made it. The brochure said paradise. The real estate agent said paradise. Her friends on Facebook said paradise. Margaret Caldwell is selling that house right now for $170,000, and she cannot find a buyer. She is losing over $100,000 on the transaction, and she considers herself lucky. Because Margaret Caldwell can still afford to leave. Most of her neighbors cannot. This is ReportSTATE. And today we are going to take Florida apart, piece by piece, to show you what is actually happening behind the palm trees and the sunshine and the pictures of happy retirees playing pickleball. Because Florida is not breaking. Florida is already broken. The cracks just have not reached your newsfeed yet. I want you to hold a number in your head for the next 25 minutes. $4,000. That is the average monthly cost of owning a median-priced home in Florida right now, when you add up the mortgage, the property tax, the homeowner's insurance, the flood insurance, and the HOA fees. $4,000 a month. Before electricity, before water, before you eat a single meal, before you put gas in your car to drive to the pharmacy for the blood pressure medication you now need because you just saw your insurance bill. $4,000. Remember that number because everything I am about to tell you explains how it got there. Let me start with what the brochure looks like. I have one right here, figuratively speaking. Sun City Center, Florida, established 1961. America's premier active adult retirement community. Average age 72. 33 holes of golf. 6 swimming pools, 200 clubs and organizations, low property taxes, no state income tax, median home price $240,000, warm winters, friendly neighbors, the American dream minus the snow shovel. That is what they sell you. That is what Margaret Caldwell bought. That is what approximately 470,000 people move to Florida for every single year. They read the brochure. They visit for a week in February when Ohio is buried under ice. They see the palm trees swaying. They feel the 78-degree breeze. They eat at a waterfront restaurant, and they sign the papers. What the brochure does not mention is the insurance. Let me tell you about a man named Richard Garza. Richard is a retired firefighter from New Jersey. 40 years of service, pension, savings. Did everything right. He bought a house in Cape Coral, Florida, in 2018 for $320,000. His homeowner's insurance that first year was $1,400. Reasonable, expected, budgeted. In 2020, his insurance went up to $2,100. In 21, it jumped to $3,200. In 22, his carrier, Heritage Insurance Holdings, dropped him entirely. Did not raise his rate, dropped him. Said they were no longer writing policies in his zip code. Richard spent 4 months calling every insurance company he could find. He finally got a policy from a company he had never heard of for $6,800 a year. That is $567 a month just for homeowners insurance. Not flood, not wind, just the basic policy. In 2024, that company also left Florida. Richard is now insured by Citizens Property Insurance Corporation, which is Florida's state-run insurer of last resort. His premium is $8,900. He pays $742 a month to insure a house that has lost $60,000 in value since he bought it. Richard Garza did not make a mistake. Richard Garza walked into a trap. Here is what happened. Between 2020 and 2024, 7 major insurance carriers either left Florida entirely or went insolvent. Not small companies. Companies that insured hundreds of thousands of homes. Heritage, United Property and Casualty, Western, FedNat, Lighthouse, St. John's, Avatar. Gone. All of them. Some went bankrupt. Some quietly stopped renewing policies. Some announced they were pausing new business in Florida and then never resumed. The result is that roughly 1.2 million Florida homeowners were dumped onto the open market looking for coverage at the same time. Supply collapsed, demand exploded, premiums went vertical. The average Florida homeowner's insurance premium hit $4,240 in 2024. That is nearly 3 times the national average. 3 times, and that is the average. In coastal counties, it is significantly worse. In Monroe County, which includes the Keys, average premiums exceeded $9,000. In Miami-Dade, $7,500. In Lee County, where Cape Coral sits, $6,800. These are not luxury homes. These are regular houses owned by regular people who retired to Florida because a brochure told them it was affordable. Why did the insurance companies leave? Because Florida is uninsurable. That is not an exaggeration. That is the math. Florida accounts for roughly 9% of all U.S. homeowners' insurance claims, but generates 79% of all homeowners' insurance lawsuits. Let that sink in. 9% of the claims, 79% of the litigation. The state has a litigation culture around insurance that makes it almost impossible for carriers to operate profitably. Contractors and lawyers work together on assignment of benefits schemes, where a homeowner signs over their insurance claim to a contractor. The contractor inflates the repair cost. The insurance company refuses to pay the inflated amount. The lawyer sues the insurance company, and the insurance company pays to settle because going to trial costs even more. This is not a conspiracy theory. The Florida legislature has published reports documenting this exact mechanism. They passed reform bills in 2022 and 23, trying to fix it. The reforms have not worked yet. The carriers are still leaving, the premiums are still climbing, and the homeowners are caught in the middle. Now let me introduce you to Citizens Property Insurance Corporation. Citizens is not a normal insurance company. It is a state-created entity designed to be the insurer of last resort. If no private company will insure your home, Citizens will. That sounds like a safety net. It is not. It is a ticking bomb. Citizens currently insures approximately 1.4 million policies in Florida. That is up from about 420,000 in 2019. The growth rate is staggering. And here is the part that should terrify every single Florida taxpayer. If a major hurricane hits and Citizens cannot pay its claims, it does not go bankrupt like a private company. Instead, it levies surcharges on every insurance policy in the state. Not just Citizens policyholders, every single insurance policy. Home, auto, business, boat. Every policy in Florida gets a surcharge to cover Citizens' losses. The estimated exposure if a Category 5 hurricane makes landfall in the Tampa Bay area is north of $130 billion. Citizens has approximately $8 billion in reserves. That gap, that $122 billion gap, comes from you. From every person in Florida who carries any kind of insurance. You are the backstop. You just do not know it yet. Let me take you to the Villages. If you have never heard of the Villages, it is the largest retirement community in the United States. Over 130,000 residents, 753 holes of golf, 83,000 homes, 3 town squares with nightly entertainment. It has its own hospital, its own newspaper, its own radio station. It is essentially its own city, built from scratch in the middle of Sumter County, Florida, starting in the 1980s. The developer, Harold Schwartz, and later his family, bought tens of thousands of acres of cattle land and turned it into a retirement metropolis. New homes are still being built, 300 per month. The waiting list is long. People from Michigan and Pennsylvania and New York sell everything and move there. The Villages markets itself as America's friendliest hometown. I want to tell you what is underneath America's friendliest hometown. The Villages sits on the Floridan aquifer. This is one of the most productive aquifer systems in the world. It supplies drinking water to approximately 10 million people across Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina. It took roughly 10,000 years to fill. The Villages alone has drilled over 300 permitted wells into this aquifer. Every new home needs water. Every golf course needs irrigation. 753 holes of golf require approximately 200 million gallons of water per year just for irrigation. The aquifer level in Sumter County has dropped measurably over the past 15 years. This is not speculation. The Southwest Florida Water Management District publishes the data. Water levels are declining, and the Villages is still building 300 homes a month. Each home adds demand. Each golf course adds demand. The aquifer does not refill at the rate it is being drained. This is simple math. Consumption exceeds replenishment. The question is not whether the Villages will face a water crisis. The question is when. But wait, there is another layer underneath the water problem: sinkholes. Florida sits on a bed of limestone. Limestone dissolves in water. When groundwater levels drop, the limestone loses structural support. The ground collapses. This is a sinkhole. Florida has more sinkholes than any other state. Between 2000 and 2023, Florida recorded over 9,000 sinkhole-related insurance claims. Pasco County alone had over 2,000. And here is the connection that nobody in the real estate industry wants you to make. When you drain an aquifer, you increase sinkhole risk. When you build 130,000 homes on top of a draining aquifer, on top of dissolving limestone, you are building a city on a foundation that is literally disappearing. The Villages has had sinkhole incidents, small ones so far, cracks in roads, depressions in yards, a retention pond that drained overnight because the bottom fell out. Small ones, so far. Let me tell you about a couple named Donald and Patricia Whitmore. They moved to a community outside of Ocala, Florida, about 40 miles from the Villages, in 2020. Their home cost $290,000. In 2022, a sinkhole opened under their garage because in Florida, sinkhole coverage is not automatically included in homeowners insurance. You have to request it separately, and most carriers will not write it. Those that do charge premiums that can double or triple the base policy cost. The Whitmores spent $62,000 out of pocket to stabilize their foundation. Their home is now worth approximately $180,000. They cannot sell it because Florida law requires disclosure of sinkhole activity, and no buyer wants a sinkhole house. Donald Whitmore is 74 years old. He went back to work part-time at a hardware store to cover the repair loan. Now I want to zoom out, because this is not just about insurance and sinkholes and water. This is about the fundamental model of how Florida operates. Florida has no state income tax. That sounds like a benefit. It is a structural choice. The state funds itself primarily through sales tax, tourism revenue, and property development. Growth is the engine. New construction generates impact fees, property taxes, construction jobs, and consumer spending. If Florida stops building, the revenue model breaks. This is why Florida approved over 300,000 new residential building permits in 2023. 300,000. While insurance carriers were leaving, while the aquifer was depleting, while sinkholes were increasing. Because Florida cannot afford to stop building. The entire state budget depends on people continuing to move there. The brochure is not just marketing, the brochure is fiscal policy. Governor Ron DeSantis stood at a podium in 2023 and said Florida is the #1 state for net migration. He said it like it was a victory. And from a budget perspective, it is. Every new resident pays sales tax. Every new home generates property tax. Every retiree draws down savings in Florida restaurants and pharmacies and golf pro shops. And all of that economic activity feeds the state budget. But here is what the governor did not say. The infrastructure is not keeping up. The roads are not keeping up. The schools in the counties that are growing fastest are not keeping up. The water supply is not keeping up. And the insurance market has collapsed. Florida is running a growth Ponzi scheme. New residents fund the infrastructure that should have been built for the previous wave of residents. And when the growth slows, the whole structure wobbles. Let me take you to the west coast of Florida, Lee County. This is where Cape Coral is. This is where Hurricane Ian made landfall on September 28, 2022, as a Category 4 storm. 156-mile-per-hour winds. Storm surge up to 18 feet. 161 people died, making it the deadliest hurricane to hit Florida since 1935. Estimated insured losses exceeded $60 billion. And here is what happened next. Thousands of homeowners filed claims. Insurance companies delayed, denied, underpaid, litigated. Some companies that owed millions in Ian claims went insolvent before paying them out. United Property and Casualty, which insured tens of thousands of homes in Lee County, filed for bankruptcy 5 months after Ian. Their policyholders got pennies on the dollar. A woman named Sandra Vega in Fort Myers had her roof torn off. She filed a claim for $142,000. Her carrier offered $19,000. She sued. The carrier went insolvent during the lawsuit. Sandra Vega got nothing. She still has a blue tarp on her roof. 3 years later. 3 years, and still the building continues. In 2024, Lee County issued 12,000 new residential permits. 12,000 new homes in a county that was devastated by a Category 4 hurricane 2 years earlier. In a county where insurance premiums tripled. In a county where the previous wave of homeowners still has blue tarps on their roofs. This is the Florida model. The machine does not stop. It cannot stop. Because if it stops, the tax revenue stops. And if the tax revenue stops, the state cannot pay for the things it already promised. So the brochures keep printing, the sales agents keep smiling, and people keep coming. Let me tell you about the water one more time, because I do not think people understand the scale. Florida uses approximately 6.4 billion gallons of fresh water per day. Roughly 60% comes from groundwater. The Floridan aquifer is the primary source. The aquifer is a renewable resource, technically. Rain falls, percolates through the soil, recharges the limestone reservoir. The problem is the recharge rate. In central Florida, the recharge rate is estimated at approximately 10 to 20 inches per year. The withdrawal rate in high-demand areas significantly exceeds this. Sprinkler systems, golf courses, agricultural irrigation, residential consumption, and commercial use are pulling water out faster than rain puts it back. The Southwest Florida Water Management District has identified multiple areas where groundwater levels have dropped below minimum sustainable levels. They call these minimum flows and levels, or MFLs. When an aquifer drops below its MFL, the district is supposed to implement recovery strategies. In practice, the recovery strategies amount to asking people to water their lawns less often, while simultaneously approving new developments that will add more demand. In 2023, the state of Florida approved a plan to pipe water from the Suwannee River Basin in North Florida to supplement supplies in Central and South Florida. The cost estimate is over $3 billion. The pipeline would move water over 100 miles. Environmental groups opposed it because reducing Suwannee River flow threatens the springs and ecosystems in North Florida. The state approved it anyway. This is what desperation looks like in infrastructure terms. When you are spending $3 billion to move water 100 miles because your aquifer is depleting, you are not solving a problem. You are buying time. Now I want to talk about a concept that economists use called a stranded asset. A stranded asset is something that once had value but has lost it due to external changes. And the loss is essentially permanent. A coal power plant in a state that banned coal is a stranded asset. I believe that within the next 10 to 15 years, a significant percentage of Florida residential real estate will become stranded assets. Not because of a single catastrophic event, because of the slow compounding of insurance costs, water scarcity, climate exposure, and infrastructure neglect. The home that cost $300,000 in 2020 will cost $4,000 a month to maintain in 2025, and $5,500 in 2028, and $7,000 in 2032. At some point, the monthly cost of owning the home exceeds what a retiree on a fixed income can afford. At that point, the home becomes unsellable, except at a catastrophic loss, because the next buyer faces the same monthly cost. The asset is stranded. It still exists physically, a house with walls and a roof, and a screened lanai, and a view of a retention pond. But economically, it is worthless, because the carrying cost exceeds the utility. Margaret Caldwell understands this. That is why she is selling now at a $110,000 loss. She is not panicking, she is doing math. She calculated that if she stays another 5 years, the cumulative insurance and maintenance costs will exceed the loss she takes by selling now. She will spend less money losing $110,000 today than she will spend trying to hold on. Think about that. The financially rational decision is to lose $110,000 on your retirement home. That is the Florida retirement trap in one sentence. But here is the thing about a trap. Some people see it and get out. Margaret Caldwell sees it. Richard Garza sees it. Sandra Vega sees it through the gap in her blue tarp. The people who are most trapped are the ones who still believe the brochure, the ones who have not moved there yet, the ones sitting in Michigan right now, looking at February snow, scrolling through Zillow listings in Port Charlotte, and thinking about how they could sell their house for $200,000 and buy something in Florida for the same price with money left over and no state income tax. Those people are the next wave. They are the fuel for the growth machine, and the machine needs them. Florida needs approximately 470,000 new residents per year to keep the budget balanced. That is not a metaphor. That is the structural fiscal reality of a state with no income tax and growing obligations. So the marketing continues. The billboards along Interstate 75, heading south, say things like, "Your dream home awaits." The television commercials show couples walking on the beach at sunset. The real estate websites show sparkling pools and manicured golf courses. What none of them show is the insurance bill. What none of them show is the sinkhole map. What none of them show is the aquifer depletion chart. What none of them show is Sandra Vega's blue tarp. I want to be clear about something. I am not saying do not retire. I am not saying Florida has no good qualities. The weather is warm, the beaches are real, The people who live there, many of them, are wonderful. What I am saying is that the economic model of Florida retirement is broken. The math does not work anymore. A state that depends on infinite growth to fund basic services on top of a depleting aquifer underneath an increasingly uninsurable property market in the direct path of intensifying hurricanes is not a retirement paradise. It is a Ponzi scheme with palm trees, and like all Ponzi schemes, it works beautifully for the people who got in early and got out before the collapse. Harold Schwartz, the developer who built the villages, became a billionaire. He got in early. He is not the one paying $742 a month for insurance. Let me leave you with one more name. Thomas Reinhardt. Tom is 71. He and his wife Carol moved to a 55-plus community in Lehigh Acres, Florida, which is in Lee County, in 2021. They paid $265,000 for a two-bedroom villa. Their first year of insurance was $2,200. It is now $7,900. Their HOA just passed a special assessment of $4,800 per unit to repair community infrastructure damaged by Hurricane Ian. Their property tax went up 18% because the county needs to rebuild roads and drainage. Tom calculated his total monthly housing cost: mortgage, insurance, property tax, HOA, special assessment, and flood insurance combined. It came to $4,312. Tom's pension and Social Security total $4,100 a month. He is now short $212 a month before food, gas, electricity, water, and medication. Tom Reinhardt is not living his retirement dream. Tom Reinhardt is subsidizing the Florida growth model with money he does not have. And he has nowhere to go because selling the house means crystallizing a loss he cannot absorb. Welcome to Florida. Come for the sun. Stay because you are too broke to leave. This is ReportSTATE, and this is just the beginning, because what is happening in Florida is not unique. It is just the most visible. Next week, we head to Texas, where they promised you no income tax and forgot to mention what happens when your property tax bill arrives. 400,000 people moved to Texas last year. Most of them have not gotten their first tax assessment yet. When they do, they are going to wish they had watched this channel first. Dale. I want to go back to something because I do not think the scale of the insurance collapse has fully landed yet. Imagine a normal functioning market. You have a house, you need insurance. There are 15 companies competing for your business. They offer different rates, different deductibles, different coverage levels. Competition keeps prices reasonable. That was Florida in 2015. Now remove 7 of those 15 companies. Completely gone. Not just raising prices. Gone. Dissolved. Bankrupt. Fled the state. Now you have 8 companies left serving the same number of customers. Prices rise because demand outstrips supply. Now 2 more of those 8 companies announce they are not writing new policies in coastal counties. They will renew existing customers, but they will not take anyone new. Now you have 6 companies in the inland counties and 4 companies on the coast where most of the population lives. Prices go vertical. That is not a hypothetical. That is what happened between 2020 and 2025 in Florida. The Florida Office of Insurance Regulation publishes data on market share and policy counts. In 2023, they reported that the top 10 private insurers in Florida controlled only about 60% of the residential market. Citizens, the state insurer of last resort, controlled approximately 25%, and the remaining 15% was split among small regional carriers, many of which are rated B or lower by AM Best, meaning their financial stability is questionable. So a quarter of Florida homeowners are insured by the state. Another 15% are insured by companies that might not survive a bad hurricane season. That means roughly 40% of Florida's residential insurance market is on shaky ground. 40%. And the premiums keep climbing. In 2025, the projection from the Insurance Information Institute is that the average Florida homeowner's insurance premium will exceed $5,000 annually. In 2020, it was $2,500. That is a 100% increase in 5 years. On a fixed retirement income, on a pension that gets a 2% cost of living adjustment if you are lucky. Your income goes up 2%. Your insurance goes up 20% every year. The gap widens. The math gets worse. The trap gets tighter. Now I want to talk about what happens when you add flood insurance to that picture. Because homeowners insurance in Florida typically does not cover flood damage. That is a separate policy, usually through the National Flood Insurance Program, which is a federal program administered by FEMA. If your home is in a designated flood zone, and a staggering amount of Florida is in a designated flood zone, your mortgage lender requires you to carry flood insurance. FEMA has been updating its flood maps and its pricing model through something called Risk Rating 2.0, which was implemented starting in 2021. Under the old system, many Florida properties had artificially low flood insurance premiums because the maps were outdated. Under Risk Rating 2.0, the premiums are based on actual risk to the individual property. For many Florida homeowners, this meant their flood insurance premium doubled or tripled overnight. A homeowner in Pinellas County named Barbara Chen saw her flood insurance go from $800 a year to $3,400. She called FEMA. They told her the new rate reflected the actual risk to her property. She said she had never flooded in 20 years. They said the model shows what could happen, not what has happened. Barbara Chen is paying $3,400 a year in flood insurance on top of her $6,000 homeowner's insurance premium. Combined, she pays $9,400 a year just for insurance. That is $783 a month. For insurance alone. Let me add up the numbers for a typical Florida retiree in 2025. This is not a worst case. This is a median case based on published data. Median home price in Florida, roughly $380,000. 30-year fixed mortgage at 6.5% with 20% down. That is a monthly payment of $1,922 for principal and interest. Property tax at the median effective rate of 0.89%. That is approximately $282 a month. Homeowners insurance at $4,500 average, that is $375 a month. Flood insurance at the post-risk rating 2.0 average of approximately $2,100, that is $175 a month. HOA fees at the Florida median of approximately $250 a month. Add those up. $1,922 plus $282 plus $375 plus $175 plus $250. That is $3,004 a month. And I have not added electricity, which in Florida averages about $165 a month, or water and sewer at about $80, or internet and phone at $100, or car insurance, which in Florida is also among the highest in the nation at about $230 a month. The total monthly cost of simply existing in a median Florida home with median expenses is approximately $3,579, before food, before gasoline, before medication, before a single trip to the golf course that the brochure promised you would enjoy every day. The median retirement income in the United States for someone 65 and older is approximately $4,000 a month from all sources combined. Social Security, pension, retirement account withdrawals. $4,000 a month income. $3,579 a month in basic housing and utility costs. That leaves $421 for everything else. Food, transportation, Healthcare copays, clothing, entertainment, $421. And one bad month, one AC repair, one car breakdown, one dental emergency, and you are in the red. That is the math of the Florida retirement trap. It is not a feeling. It is not a political opinion. It is arithmetic. Now multiply that by 470,000 new residents per year. Multiply that by 2.5 million retirees already in the state. Multiply that by insurance premiums rising 15 to 25% annually, while Social Security cost of living adjustments average 2 to 3%. The gap is exponential. It is not closing. It is accelerating. Every year more retirees cross the line from comfortable to struggling. Every year more homes become stranded assets. Every year the machine needs more new residents to keep the budget afloat, and every year the pitch to those new residents becomes a bigger lie by omission. There is a neighborhood in Lehigh Acres, the same community where Tom Reinhardt lives, where I counted, using satellite data and county records, 27 homes listed for sale on a single street of 42 houses. 27 out of 42. That is 64% of the street trying to sell at the same time. The average list price is 31% below what those homes last sold for. Nobody is buying because anyone smart enough to research the area sees the insurance premiums and runs. The homes sit on the market for months. The owners keep paying insurance and HOA and property tax while they wait. Every month they wait costs them another $3,000 to $4,000. The trap does not just catch you when you buy, it keeps catching you while you try to leave. I have spent a lot of time on the money because that is what traps people. But I want to spend a moment on the physical reality because the financial crisis is happening on top of a physical one. Florida is flat. The highest point in the state is 345 feet above sea level, and most of the populated areas are under 15 feet. Sea level rise, measured at the Key West tide gauge, is approximately 9 inches over the past century, and the rate is accelerating. The current projection from NOAA is an additional 10 to 12 inches by 2050. In a state where most coastal infrastructure is built at 3 to 6 feet of elevation, another foot of sea level rise does that it fundamentally changes the physics of flooding. A hurricane does not need to be stronger to cause more damage. It just needs 1 more foot of water to start with. Hurricane Ian's storm surge was measured at up to 18 feet in parts of Fort Myers Beach. If sea level is 1 foot higher when the next Ian hits, the surge reaches 1 foot further inland. 1 foot does not sound like much until you look at the topography of coastal Florida, which is essentially flat. 1 additional foot of base sea level can push storm surge hundreds of yards further inland in low-lying areas. Neighborhoods that barely survived Ian will not survive the next one. And the next one is not a question of if, it is a question of when. The National Hurricane Center's historical data shows that a Category 4 or 5 hurricane strikes Florida approximately once every 7 to 10 years on average. Ian was 2022. The clock is already ticking. And here is where the insurance crisis and the climate reality create a feedback loop that nobody in Tallahassee wants to talk about. Insurance companies price risk. That is literally their entire business model. They look at the probability of a loss event and the expected cost of that event, and they set premiums accordingly. When the probability goes up and the expected cost goes up simultaneously, premiums do not increase linearly, they increase exponentially. Climate models project that Atlantic hurricane intensity will increase by roughly 5 to 10% per degree Celsius of ocean warming. The Gulf of Mexico surface temperature has risen approximately 1 degree Celsius over the past 40 years. It is projected to rise another 1 to 1.5 degrees by 2050. Warmer water equals more energy, equals stronger storms, equals higher wind speeds, equals more storm surge, equals more damage, equals higher claims, equals higher premiums. The insurance companies are not leaving Florida because they are greedy. They are leaving because their actuaries ran the models, and the models said, this market is no longer profitable at any premium a homeowner can afford. That is the death spiral. Premiums rise until they are unaffordable. Homeowners drop coverage. Uninsured homes cannot be sold with a mortgage. Property values drop. Tax revenue drops. The state cannot fund infrastructure repairs. Infrastructure deteriorates. The next storm causes more damage because the infrastructure is weaker. Claims increase. More carriers leave. Premiums rise further. Repeat. Now I want to introduce one more element that completes the picture. Saltwater intrusion. When you pump fresh water out of an aquifer faster than it recharges, you create a vacuum. In coastal areas, that vacuum gets filled by salt water from the ocean, seeping laterally into the aquifer. This is saltwater intrusion, and it is happening right now along both coasts of Florida. The Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department has documented saltwater intrusion moving westward into the Biscayne Aquifer, which supplies drinking water to approximately 2.7 million people in southeast Florida. They have had to shut down well fields and move pumping stations further inland. In 2020, the saltwater front in the Biscayne Aquifer was measured approximately 2 miles further west than it was in 2010. 2 miles in 10 years. As sea levels rise and pumping continues, the intrusion accelerates. At some point, and hydrologists debate exactly when, but agree it is coming, the aquifer in coastal southeast Florida will be too contaminated for drinking water use. The backup plan is desalination, which works but costs approximately 3 to 4 times more than treating fresh water from an aquifer. That cost gets passed to residents through water bills. Another monthly expense going up. Another line item squeezing retirees on fixed incomes. Another crack in the Paradise brochure. Let me bring this back to the human level, because data without faces is just noise. I want to tell you about a woman named Gloria Hutchins. Gloria is 78. She moved to a manufactured home community in Northport, Florida, in 2016. She paid $89,000 for a double-wide on a rented lot. Her total monthly cost in 2016 was $1,400. Mortgage, lot rent, insurance, utilities. Manageable on her Social Security of $2,100 a month. She had $700 left for food, transportation, and medical costs. Tight but workable. In 2024, Gloria's lot rent increased from $450 to $620 after the community was purchased by an investment firm that announced improvements. Her insurance went from $900 a year to $3,200 after her previous carrier left Florida. Her water bill increased 40% after the county raised rates to fund infrastructure upgrades. Her total monthly cost is now $2,310. Her Social Security is $2,240. She is $70 short every month. Every single month. She has been covering the gap with her savings, which started at $11,000 and are now down to about $3,000. She estimates she has about 3.5 years before the money is completely gone. Gloria Hutchins cannot sell her manufactured home because manufactured homes in Florida are depreciating assets in a falling market. Her home that cost $89,000 is now worth maybe $35,000, and even at that price, there are no buyers because the lot rent alone is $620 a month and rising. Gloria Hutchins is 78 years old, and she is doing math that tells her she will be financially underwater by the time she is 81. She has no children. She has no extended family with resources. She has a manufactured home in Northport, Florida, that she cannot sell, cannot afford, and cannot walk away from because she has nowhere else to go. There are hundreds of thousands of Glorias in Florida right now. That is not hyperbole. The AARP estimated in a 2023 report that approximately 1.3 million Floridians over the age of 65 are housing cost-burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. Nearly 600,000 are severely cost-burdened, spending more than 50%. These are people who did the responsible thing. They saved, they planned, they moved to where the brochure told them they could afford to live, and then the ground shifted under them. Not literally, although in some cases literally, but financially, structurally, systematically. The costs rose, and their incomes did not, and the gap became a chasm. I am going to close this video the same way I opened it, with Margaret Caldwell in Sun City Center. Margaret listed her house 3 months ago. She has had 4 showings, no offers. Her realtor told her she might need to drop the price another $15,000 to attract a buyer. If she does that, she will have lost $125,000 on a house she owned for 5 years. Her entire Ohio nest egg, plus another $40,000 from her retirement account. Gone. Absorbed by the Florida real estate machine. She told me, and I am paraphrasing because this was a written exchange, she said I did everything right. I saved for 30 years. I researched the area. I bought within my budget. And I am still losing everything. Not because I made a bad choice, because the place I chose turned out to be a lie. Margaret Caldwell is not a victim of a hurricane. She is not a victim of a sinkhole. She is not a victim of fraud in the traditional sense. Margaret Caldwell is a victim of a system that needs her money more than it needs her well-being. A state that markets itself as paradise while its aquifer depletes, its insurance market collapses, its coastline erodes, and its infrastructure crumbles. A state that approves 300,000 new building permits a year because it cannot afford not to. A state that needs 470,000 new Margarets every year to keep the lights on. Florida is not a retirement destination, it is a revenue model, and the retirees are the product. This is Report State. Next week, Texas, where they told you no state income tax and nobody mentioned the property tax. Subscribe, and if you are sitting in Michigan or Ohio or Pennsylvania right now looking at Zillow listings in Florida, I have one piece of advice. Close the tab. Watch next week's video first. Then do the math. Real math, not brochure math. See you next week.